Hey everyone, it's Caitlin and welcome to another video. In this video, we are going to be making two different fall-inspired desserts that are perfect for almost any occasion. If you want to bring them to Thanksgiving, celebrate anything, you just want to make a dessert for yourself. They're very fall themed and really delicious, and I'm very excited to share them with you. They're actually both revolving around apples. So we're going to be making some spiced apple cider donuts, baked donuts. They're tender, they're fluffy, they're really, really good. And then we're also going to be making an apple crumb pie. So let's just get into the recipes because I'm gonna show you how to make it now. I can stop talking about it. First up, we're going to be making our vegan apple crumb pie, and this recipe has three main components: the crust, the filling, and then the crumble on top. Obviously, we're gonna start with the crust. I'm making my 3-ingredient vegan pie crust, but you can use any pie crust that you want or a store-bought one if you're short on time. But here I just combined some almond flour, tapioca starch or arrowroot powder, and some salt into a bowl. Then we're going to whisk that until it's well combined and add in 2 flax eggs, which is 2 tablespoons of ground flax mixed with 5 tablespoons of water. You just let that gel up for about 5 minutes. And then I like to start by using a spatula to sort of mix the flax in with the flours. And the flours are actually pretty absorbent, so it might look a little dry at first, but once you switch from the spatula to your hands, you should be able to work all of the extra flour into the dough ball, and then just be left with a cohesive and not very sticky at all ball of dough. I really love this recipe. It's very versatile. It can be used in sweet or savory recipes if you want to make a quiche. So yeah, would recommend. So to roll our dough ball out, because this is gluten-free, the flour is a little bit more sticky, so I like to use parchment paper. I just flatten the dough ball in between 2 sheets of it, and then I use a rolling pin or another object if you don't have a rolling pin to flatten it out. And honestly, I don't really go by thickness. I more go by the base of my pie tin, so you just want it to be wide enough so it will cover the base and the sides of your pie since we will be filling it. Once that's wide enough, you can peel off the top sheet of parchment paper and then flip this pie sheet over onto your pie tin. I'm actually using a tart pan just because I think it looks prettier, but a pie tin will work just as well. Then you're gonna peel that top sheet of parchment paper off, and then you can use your fingers to sort of press the pie dough in. And the thing I like about this dough, it's very easy to rip it apart and put it back in another area. So if your crust was too thin in one area, or you have extra and you want to reincorporate it into the pie dish, you can do that now. And as you can see, once you press it in, it blends pretty seamlessly, and we're filling it anyway, so honestly, it doesn't really matter. The last step with the pie base is to just take a fork and poke some holes in the base and around the sides. This way it doesn't bubble up in any odd way. So once that's done, you can set it aside, and now we're going to work on our apple filling, which is pretty quick and easy because we're not baking the apples beforehand. So you're going to need between 2 and 3 apples. My red apples were a little bit smaller, so that's why I needed 2 of them, but I would recommend using a combination of a sour apple, here I'm using a Granny Smith apple, and a sweeter apple like Gala, Fuji, or Honeycrisp. I think it has more depth of flavor and it doesn't make the pie too overly sweet. So here I'm just coring my apples, and you can choose to slice your apples if you like, but I'm going to be using my mandolin because it's a lot faster. You can also peel your apples if you want, but personally, I don't mind them with the peels on, so I left them as is. Before we slice our apples though, we're going to make the marinade or flavorings for them. We're going to start with 1 small lemon and add that to the base of our bowl. If you're using canned lemon juice or fridge lemon juice, I don't know what you call that, it's about 2 or 3 tablespoons. We're also going to be adding in just a touch of maple syrup and some classic apple pie spices. Full amounts are in the recipe description, which is linked below. We're also going to add a touch of salt and some arrowroot powder, which is going to help thicken up this sauce that we're making that's going to coat the apples. Then just give that a whisk until everything is nicely dissolved and evenly incorporated. And now it's time to slice our apples. So you can do this by hand if you want. Like I said, I prefer to use the mandolin because every cut is more even, and so that way they'll just cook more evenly in the oven. I will say, just be careful not to slice yourself on the mandolin. I have been doing this for several years and I have nicked myself in the past, but I'm pretty good about it now. If you want to, you can purchase some of those safety gloves, but definitely go at a pace that is comfortable for you. I wanted to show a slower one before I speed it up because honestly, this is kind of stressing me out just looking at it, but I promise I didn't cut my hand. All apples were safely sliced. So now we're going to mix everything together until the apples get all nice and coated in that spice mix, and it should already smell like apple pie at this point. So I hope you were getting excited at this point in the recipe. I'm honestly kind of excited just looking at it. So that's pretty much it for our filling. Now all that's left to do is to add it to our pie base. When you add the apples to the pie, sometimes they don't lay super flat. So after I put them in with all the remaining liquid, I like to use my hands to rearrange them just to make sure they're more compact. And I didn't pre-bake this pie base because when I tested it, it still came out crispy in the end. But if you're using another recipe, you might want to blind bake it first so you get more of that crunchy pie base. Last but not least, we're going to work on our crumble topping. I've used a recipe similar to this for my fruity crumble bar, so it might look familiar to you. We're going to again be using some almond flour, arrowroot powder, cinnamon, baking powder, and salt, along with some rolled oats, and we're just going to whisk that all together until everything is evenly distributed. Then for our wet ingredients for our crumble, we're going to be using some maple syrup. And you can use any nut or seed butter of choice. Here I'm using almond butter because I thought the flavor really goes well with the almond flour. If you wanted this to have more of a peanutty taste, you could use peanut butter. You could also use tahini, or if you have a nut allergy, I think you could also use sunflower seed butter pretty well, though it might turn slightly green in the oven. It just kind of does that, which is kind of odd, but you know, it'll still taste delicious. So your crumble should form a kind of like dough ball. Honestly, you could make this into cookies. And at this point, you're just going to use your fingers to crumble it over the pie. Try to aim for smaller chunks rather than big pieces, because they will crisp up more in the oven. And I'm also trying to evenly spread the crumble around the whole surface of the pie. So, you know, each slice will get an even amount of crumble, but also so it's spaced out enough where you can still kind of see the apples underneath. So people will know it's gonna be an amazing apple crumb pie. So just keep on doing this with all of your crumble. And then once you're done, we're going to place this in the oven to bake at 350 for around 30 minutes. Then afterwards, your pie should look something like this. The crumble should be nice and golden and crispy on top. And you're going to let your pie cool, or you can serve it warm, slice it and serve it as desired. I cut myself up a nice little slice and plopped it on a plate with some vanilla ice cream, because I think that's just the quintessential apple pie combo. And this pie isn't overly sweet, which I really enjoy because the sweetness from the ice cream like makes it complete package. Next up, we're going to be making our apple cider donuts. These are also very delicious and made from similar but different but still tasty ingredients. So the first thing we're going to do is to reduce some apple cider. I'm using spiced cider for an extra kick of flavor, but you could use regular cider as well. You're just going to add it to a pot and simmer it on medium-low heat for about 30 minutes. You want the volume of the cider to decrease by about a third. So this just condenses the sweetness and the flavor, because that way we're packing the apple flavor in our donuts. Otherwise, if we, you know, just added the apple cider, it wouldn't be as strong, or if we added as much, it would be kind of soupy. So now that that's aside, we're gonna set it to cool. And I'm also making some vegan buttermilk here by combining some apple cider vinegar with some soy milk and setting that aside for 5 minutes. Next, we're moving on to the dry ingredients. We're adding some oat flour, some apple pie spice, along with some baking powder and baking soda, and finally salt to a bowl. Then you're just going to take a whisk and whisk that all together until there are no more clumps and all of the spices are evenly distributed. Then in a separate bowl, we're going to combine all of our wet ingredients, starting out with some nut butter. Here I am using a runny almond butter, but again, like I said with the pie, you can use anything that you so desire. We're also adding some coconut sugar and our thickened flax eggs, and then also the reduced apple cider. And last but not least, I've been saying and a lot, our vegan buttermilk. So then at this point, again, you're going to mix everything together until it forms a thicker liquid. I would recommend probably using a larger bowl. The biggest issue here is just dissolving the nut butter completely into the other wet ingredients. So once that's all mixed, you're going to add that to the bowl of the dry ingredients and then slowly incorporate the two together using a spatula until there are no more dry clumps of flour and everything is evenly saturated and incorporated. Fun fact, the apple cider vinegar, you can't taste it, but it's actually a double acting ingredient here because it helps make our buttermilk, and it also reacts with the baking soda to help make these donuts more fluffy. It produces little air bubbles in the oven, gives the donuts more rise. So now I am filling my donut pans. I greased them with some nonstick cooking spray, and I'm just using a cookie scoop to add batter to them, but you can use a spoon as well. I just personally find this a little easier. Then I like to use my finger to smooth out the tops. But once you're all done with that, the donut molds should be pretty filled. We're just going to pop those into the oven until they have risen and turned beautiful and golden brown. And at this point, I would let them sit in the pan for about 3 to 5 minutes. They're going to deflate slightly, as you can see. And when using silicone donut molds, I kind of like to pull the ends apart, as you can see here. This just helps separate the donuts from the edges more and makes them easier to remove when you're going on to the individual donut. So for this, I sort of like to go underneath the donut mold and use my fingers to push it up and then carefully sort of flip it into my hand. This can be a little tricky because they're tender, but if you practice it enough, that makes perfect, I guess. So you're just going to remove all of the donuts from their molds and then set them on a baking rack to let them cool completely before we top them in cinnamon sugar. And this is mainly because while the donuts are cooling, the crumb structure is still developing. So if you tried to coat them while they were warm, they would fall apart as with any baked goods. So it's just good to let them cool because they'll solidify a little more and firm up. And then now we can move on to our next step, which is technically optional, but highly recommended. We're gonna coat these babies in some cinnamon sugar. So here I just have some soy milk. You can use another plant-based milk if you want. And I just quickly blitzed some raw cane sugar and cinnamon together in a blender just to sort of break up the cane sugar a little bit more. You're gonna dunk each donut into the plant milk just for a few seconds to moisten it, and then toss it around in that bowl to get it coated in cinnamon sugar. I just did one side. I feel like that's enough and you don't need to do both sides. And it just adds the perfect amount of crunch and sweetness to these donuts. It almost reminds me of coffee cake, and it's really, really delicious and addicting. So as you can see, these donuts are nice and soft and tender, and it's just like, yeah, honestly, they remind me of coffee cake because of the crumble on top, and they're just really, really good. You should try them. All right, guys, and that is it for this video. Leave a comment down below and tell me if you'd rather have a donut or a piece of pie first. You know, I know it's not gonna be the popular opinion, but I think I'd rather have a piece of pie, warm pie with like melty ice cream on top, even though I know donuts are very trendy. I like donuts, but I honestly just really love pie. So as always, both of these recipes are going to be linked below, so you can check out the full list of ingredients. I have gram measurements as well as metric is grams, US measurements, and some images so you can save them to Pinterest if you want to save them for later. And if you have any future video suggestions or recipe suggestions that you would like me to veganize and or make, you can also leave a comment down below and I'd be happy to do that for you. Also be sure to like, comment, subscribe, you know the drill. Support my channel because it's nice when you do. I hope you guys are having an awesome day and continue to have an awesome day. And I look forward to virtually kind of seeing you in the next video. Bye.